Hello. Well, what I'm going to do now is first of all, got to try and make sure I'm using the right microphone. Yeah, I am. I'm going to try to explain what is going on in the Middle East. So far, sorry, the screen just went blank. So far as I can work it out. But obviously, I'm not privy to all the information there is. But this is the way I see it. And, well, make of that what you want. Now, this is probably going to go on for quite a while, so I might have to split the video up. Be prepared for that. All right, so let's get some points in place. And the first point is that Israel is hosting the Eurovision Song Contest this year. Hold that thought. The second point is that it's Ramadan. Hold that thought as well. And the third point is that there have been some disastrous floods in Iran. And I don't just mean a few streets or a town or something. It's been apocalyptically bad throughout the whole country. I think something like 21 out of 27 provinces have been affected, some of them disastrously.
Hey, habardar, hey, habardar! Hey, ağaç getirdi, ağaç satmalı oluyor. Hey, zinde olmuyor.
And the major reasons for the devastation is that there's corruption amongst the religious authorities, meaning that the local infrastructure hasn't been getting the funds it's needed, and also municipal and governmental jobs have been given to unqualified people, like sons of the local imam, cousins, that sort of thing, or people who just tick the right religious boxes. So the town planning and forestry are chaotic. They're cutting down trees to sell them because they need the foreign exchange. And they're not replanting, and they aren't making effective provision for water management. There's a case of a dam that burst recently because the overflow gates hadn't been maintained and they couldn't be opened to relieve the pressure. There are also cases, of course, of rivers overflowing their banks simply because either buildings have been, planning permission hasn't been properly supervised, and buildings have been put too near to places where there are known overflows, and in other cases river embankments were not properly built or maintained or even put there at all. Iranians are not stupid. They can see this is happening and they are blaming the governing authorities. And You can tell there's desperation there. They've even got people out standing in the water praying. I'm quite sure there are many Iranians who realise the ineffectiveness of that. So it would be in the interests of the governing authorities to have something else on the news, besides crying babies being held in the arms of mothers who are sitting in a truck watching their houses and all their possessions being washed away into the nearest valley. Okay, so hold that thought. Now, back to Gaza. What happened to Gaza was this. This is now the history. Just a minute. I'm talking about Gaza because of all the rockets that have come out of Gaza recently and been falling on Israel, killing people. I mean, the Israeli Iron Dome defence system is quite effective, but when 700 rockets suddenly appear in the skies within a couple of days, even the Iron Dome can't deal with that. People have been killed, of course, houses have been destroyed, and an entire area of Israel traumatised. And I've seen some videos of people getting married in air raid shelters and that sort of thing because their wedding celebrations couldn't take place in, well, the halls and places that they had planned on. That's something else. Let's go into the history of Gaza. The government used to be part of Fatah, which is in control of what used to be known as the West Bank. After the 1948 war between the Arabs, all the surrounding Arab countries, and the new country of Israel, Egypt seized Gaza because that was on the end of the Sinai Peninsula, and the Kingdom of Transjordan seized the West Bank. But neither country absorbed these areas as part of their own fiefdoms. They didn't allow the citizens of those areas to become citizens of their respective countries because it was to their advantage to keep the people bottled up and discontented and provided with a subsistence living from the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which, by the way, is the only refugee organisation in the entire world which was set up specifically for one particular group of refugees. They only support Palestinians, no other sort of refugee. That's the UNRWA. And it's because of this organisation that the refugees are persisting, because, of course, when an organisation is set up, it wants to keep itself going. So frequently it happens that it perpetuates the system it's supposed to be helping, but that's another matter. So what happened was that when Egypt relinquished claims on Gaza, because it was more trouble than it was worth, and Jordan relinquished the West Bank because they lost control after a war. Oh, I know that's a vast oversimplification, but I don't have the next 24 hours to go into the minutiae. So both Gaza and the West Bank were supposed to be under the control of Fatah, that is Egypt, and the Kingdom of Transjordan gave the territory into the hands of Fatah, which at the time was being run by Yasser Arafat. Well, that was an unstable situation, and everyone with any sense would have known that. It was like the two halves of Pakistan. They're just not governable to have a country and then a space governed by another country and then part of the same country. It was always going to break into two, and pretty soon Gaza was taken over by an extreme group we know as Hamas. They dealt with the Fatah supporters by tying their feet to trucks and then driving through the streets of Gaza and pursuing similar other well-established political arguments which are common in that part of the Arab world. After taking control, Hamas pursued a policy of turning itself into an armed camp with the single object of making all its citizens, filling the minds of its citizens with the idea of killing as many Jews as they could get their hands on. So there were school programs and social programs and military programs and everything pointed towards that one object. Mind you, the word Jew is pretty elastic in Hamas's book, since Israel has a population that's only about 80% Jewish. There are all sorts of other religions and racial groups there as well, including a substantial Arab population, both Muslim and Christian and Baha'i and all that sort of thing. And quite a few of them have actually been killed by Hamas attacks in mistake for Jews. Because to Hamas, as to almost any other anti-Semitic person or organisation, Jews and Israelis are the same thing. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked again. Back to Gaza. Hamas has pursued its agenda, broadcasting TV shows that urge children to grow up to kill Jews, and it's spending most of its aid money on weaponry and military installations, while most of the people, the ordinary people, are kept in a state of semi-literate poverty. But there's only so far you can go with that, although it's quite dangerous to speak openly in Gaza. Some are talking about the nice houses the palatial houses of the Hamas leaders and their families, as opposed to the hovels of the general population. And everyone in Gaza knows that if you want decent medical attention, you go to an Israeli hospital. And before some idiot makes a comment about the Israeli embargo, there isn't an embargo on medical supplies. I'll find something on the internet about that and I'll put it up there. Now, where is Hamas getting its money from for all this materiel? Well, some of it comes from the UNRWA. I've talked about them. And some from the European Union directly. But in the case of Hamas and Gaza, most of it comes from Qatar. Because the Palestinian Authority, remember those guys on the West Bank, choked off the funds to Gaza because they didn't recognise Fatah's authority. However, don't ask me why, because I don't know, but there was a row between Qatar and Hamas recently, and Hamas refused to accept the recent suitcases full of money that Qatar was bringing to them. So what's happened is that Hamas is running out of money, and the Hamas civil service has ground to a halt because the people working there aren't getting paid. Now, this is serious because you can starve the population, but you can't starve the civil service of any country. They get very, very upset by that sort of thing, and they stop running the country. For that reason, Hamas had recently opened negotiations with Israel, via Egypt, of course, because they're too childish to talk directly. And Hamas had opened negotiations with Israel via Egypt to cool things off. Now, let's go back to Iran. Remember I told you to hold that thought about the floods? Well, Iran has been trying to wrest regional power out of the hands of the Saudis. And to do that, they're mobilising all the Shiite forces they can to surround the Sunni state. So Saudi is Sunni, but there are Shiites in the Yemen, so that's the bottom half. And of course, there are Shiites round the eastern side even of Saudi Arabia. And what they're trying to do is to make Shiite friendly the country on the other side of the Persian Gulf as well. So Saudi is not the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea. I wish I had a map in front of me. The other side of the Red Sea, Somalia, that sort of area. So they're trying to surround Saudi. I'll get a map up. It'll show a lot more than trying to explain it from memory. And also, they're trying to get a foothold further north. And to that end, they've been offering financial support to some people in Gaza. And a small group of them have converted to Shiism Could you call this Shiism schism? No, you can't. Okay. So there's a small group of people. I don't know whether they've all converted to become Shiites, or they're still Sunnis but have allowed themselves to become friendly to the Shiites possibly for financial reasons. But anyway, they've gone rogue and they've started their own franchise, and they call themselves Islamic Jihad, and they're there in Gaza. And they were a small group, they are becoming larger because there are a lot of disaffected people in Gaza now. They're funded by Iran, and they are the ones who are responsible for shooting the 700 rockets at Israel over the past few days. Now, when they started their onslaught, it looked as if Hamas was quite happy for them to carry on. After all, Israel doesn't want rockets disrupting the Eurovision festivities. And the rockets started around the time of Israeli Independence Day anyway, and there's nothing Hamas likes better than to disrupt Israel whenever there's a celebration or a religious holiday of any sort. So it looked like they were broadly not going to do anything much about Islamic Jihad's little excursion into a bit of freelance bombing. But then again, it does look very much as if Hamas has sort of lost control of Islamic Jihad, because Islamic Jihad didn't just stop at a few token rockets, which is what Hamas does, one or two, bit of disruption, but not enough to cause the Israelis to retaliate in any serious way. No, Islamic Jihad kept on going. They didn't stop at a few rockets, and when the Israelis retaliated, they did so by bombing Hamas installations, not Islamic Jihad. And so far as I could tell, they shot at a car carrying a Hamas commander and blew it out of the road. And I did wonder how the Israelis knew that the commander was in that car, or where the car was indeed. And either they have complete control of Hamas's radio communications and know everything about their movements, or they do have disaffected Hamas operatives feeding them information. And in my opinion, that's probably more likely. Either way, whether it's the Israelis know everything that they're saying to each other over the phone, or whether they have informers, Hamas should be nervous. But the point is, Iran is funding this attack. A while ago, I was talking about this with my husband, and I said I didn't understand why the Israelis aren't actually attacking Iran. After all, Hamas is only the little Satan. The impulsion for this is coming from Iran. I said I was quite sure the Saudis, who are even more nervous of Iran than the Israelis are, would be only too glad to turn a blind eye to Israeli rockets heading over their airspace towards Iran, to down a couple of Revolutionary Guard installations. And it looks like I'm not the only one who had that thought, because I just heard on the news that the American aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln is, it said, heading to the Middle East. I don't know if it's heading to the Mediterranean or the Persian Gulf, but I'll be willing to make a bet that it's the Persian Gulf. I don't know yet, and it could be events will overtake this video. But anyway, as I said, the Iranian authorities want something to distract their disaffected people from the hash they're making of looking after their own country. And the reason I think that the Abraham Lincoln is heading to the Persian Gulf is because a war with Israel or with Saudi would do nicely to help the Persians distract themselves, and shutting the Straits of Hormuz would kick the whole thing off very well. You can imagine the panicked phone calls from the Saudis to the Americans about that possibility. Well, America might come to help them this time. But now that America has such a good supply of shale oil, as opposed to shell oil, that might not happen too many times again. And so I reckon this is the start of a long-term war between Saudi and Iran. And all this stuff going on in Gaza is probably something of a side issue, although serious enough to the people involved, no doubt. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, and if you wish to donate, click the subscribe star link where you can make a one-off payment or set up a regular contribution, or I have a PayPal account at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.